Hello, friends. This video is entitled The Revelations of a Man in Despair. And this is from the book of Lamentations. Lamentations is written by the prophet Jeremiah. And some of the things that he says about himself in this little 5-chapter book are the reason why we call Jeremiah the weeping prophet. He was filled with despair and sadness over the state of the nation of Israel, many of whom had been carried off to Babylon, leaving the land destitute. And there's a reason why this book is called Lamentations, because it's filled with, lamentations. It's filled with woe, sadness, and despair. And so this is the reason for doing this video, because some of you may be trapped in a place of despair. And I just want the word to come and wash over you and give you hope. So here we go. I've always marveled at and loved that little oasis of chapters, a chapter right in the middle of the book in chapter 3. And so I want to look at the verses 19 through 41 of Lamentations 3. And I want to talk to you about 7 revelations that Jeremiah had in the midst of his despair. Number 1 revelation is it is a choice to think a certain way about a circumstance. You have the power to think any way you want to about a given circumstance. Look at how Jeremiah chose to think about his situation in verses 19 to 21. I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I will remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Wow, what a sharp turn he just took from woe and despair, and my soul is downcast within me, to yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Jeremiah chose to think about his dilemma in a different way, a way that filled him with hope. You know, life is full of intersections where we are forced to make choices. You have a choice to think about things in a way that give you hope. And that brings me to his second revelation of a man in despair. God's compassion and faithfulness are endless. Listen to the thing that Jeremiah called to mind and that resulted in hope for him. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Wow. Compassions in the original language has some beautiful imagery to it. It has to do with the womb, and specifically the connection between the mother and the fetus. It represents a deep, visceral feeling of compassion that God has in his heart towards us. The word faithfulness here literally means firmness, but figuratively, it means security or moral dependability. His faithfulness is firmly in place, and it is secure, and it is morally dependable. Wow, that is a revelation that we need to see. The third revelation of a man in despair is you must seek God and wait patiently for the circumstance to pass. And here are the verses. Starts in verse 25. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. It is good to wait patiently for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for a man to bear the yoke while he is young. Let him sit alone in silence, for the Lord has laid it on him. Let him bury his face in the dust. There may yet be hope. Let him offer his cheek to one who would strike him. Let him be filled with disgrace. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. Boy, that word seek is a huge word. It means a whole lot more than just looking for. The word seek means to search out, to follow after, to pursue, to strive after, to investigate, to crave, and even demand. And it sounds kind of like the forceful taking the kingdom by force, doesn't it? It says, it is good to bear the yoke while you're young. You know, when we are young, we can be kind of cocky. I was. But when the yoke comes, it brings with it a measure of humility. And speaking of humility, Jeremiah says the person under a yoke needs to do 3 things. 1, sit alone in silence. You know, it's really tempting to stand up on a table or a housetop and try to justify and to explain and defend yourself. But he says, sit alone in silence. 2, bury his face in the dust. Whew. But figuratively, of course. But it just indicates true contrition. And he must offer his cheek to the one who would strike him. That sounds a lot like something Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, doesn't it? The 4th revelation of a man in despair is that things will change. Not might, not likely to. Things will change. Verse 31 says, for no one is cast off by the Lord forever. Listen, there is an end to this trial. I didn't say it was in sight yet, but there is an end out there to this thing. Things will change. You know, there was a time when my wife and I had to move a couple of hours north of here to take a job promotion, and we didn't know anybody in that new city. And almost immediately, we began to feel a little lonely and disconnected. And after 2 years, it was kind of starting to affect our emotional health. So we really began to seek to pursue God over this, and we prayed and asked for wisdom. And he gave us a solution. And within a very short period of time, we were back in our home. That was 10 years ago. That's just one example of a lifetime of circumstances that never lasted forever. Things did change. Things will change. Number 5, revelation from a man in despair. It pains God when we are pained. Listen to verse 32. Though he brings grief, he will show compassion. So great is his unfailing love. For he does not willingly, listen to this, for he does not willingly bring affliction or grief to anyone. To crush underfoot all prisoners in the land, to deny people their rights before the Most High, to deprive them of justice, would not the Lord see such things? So in other words, God wants to bring his own pain to an end over the circumstances causing you pain as well, and pour out his abundant mercy. The 6th revelation of a man in despair is submit to God. Here's the verses 37 and verse 38. Who can speak and have it happen if the Lord has not decreed it? Is it not from the mouth of the Most High that both calamities and good things come? Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how did you get submit to God out of those verses? It's because half of us will probably go out and blame the devil on what's happening to us and engage in spiritual warfare. And you know what? That's a fine thing to do. And it even might be helpful in the circumstances. It just depends on what it is. But these verses say that the Lord is the author of both good things and calamities. You notice he didn't say good things and bad things. He said he is the author of both good things and calamities. And calamities can sometimes be a good thing. It all depends on how we choose to think about it, isn't it? That kind of was our first revelation right there. We need to just bow before God and yield lordship to him, just like we did when we first came to him and laid our life before him. And the 7th and final revelation of a man in despair is practice self-examination and worship God. Listen to these verses. I love these. Let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. Let us lift up our hearts and our hands to God in heaven. You know, self-examination and reflection can be a very powerful exercise. Those who developed lean management systems, they understood that And do understand that reflection is a very powerful part of the process. To go back and look over what happened, kind of a post-mortem, if you will. And what is the value of self-examination and reflection? It helps you see yourself better in relation to others, and especially towards God. It can also give you a better appreciation of your relationship to God and others. And you will be able to see things from a new and different perspective. 7 revelations from a man in despair. It is a choice to think a certain way about a circumstance. God's compassion and faithfulness are endless. You must seek God and wait patiently for the circumstance to pass. Things will change. It pains God when we are in pain. Submit to God and practice self-examination and worship God. Thank you for watching, folks. God bless you.